Doctor of Osteopathy from University of North Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. In 2004, she received her Master's in Public Health from UNT's School of Public Health, where her research focused on eating disorder. She completed her residency at Houston's Christus St. Joseph Family Practice Residency Program in 2005. She achieved her board certification in Integrative Holistic Medicine in 2014. So here, Dr. Chashmawala. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. To get started, I want to share a little story about myself. I grew up lacto-vegetarian, as many of us did, and we traveled a lot when I was younger. So what happened when I moved to Texas is that I got hit with allergies, really bad. Who's experienced allergies here in Texas, right? We all do. And so one of the things that happened, especially when I went to Austin for undergrad, is that I would get sick all the time. My entire spring semester, I missed so many classes because I would be sick with allergies. I can't tell you the number of times I called Gaur Bhakti and I was like, I am so sick, I have a fever. She called me antibiotics, she called me on steroids. And every spring, that's how it would go, that I would have to be on antibiotics and steroids. When I took the MCAT, which they offered in spring at that time, I had a fever of 104. So I went to an allergist and I got tested. And they did the skin prick test, and I reacted so strongly that they had to dilute the testing doses. And at the end of all of that, he was like, take some Claritin. I was like, I've been taking Claritin for years, it's done nothing. So I went and did some research. This, mind you, is pre-Google, right? So I had to actually go to a library, and I did some research, and I found this obscure text on holistic and natural healing. And in it, it said that dairy can cause inflammation and mucus, and so if you suffer from allergies, you should maybe cut out dairy. I was thinking, man, I'm already lacto-vegetarian. I have to give up milk too. So slowly, after a couple of years, I completely gave up all dairy, and that's 22 years ago. I have not had any problems with allergies since then. So that was like my first encounter, the link between nutrition and our health. So that became a passion of mine, and I was so excited when I went to medical school, because I was like, oh, I'm going to learn about nutrition and how that impacts our health. Guess how many hours of nutrition we got in medical school? I mean, doctors, zero is usually most common. I got 1 hour. It was about how to tube feed a comatose patient. It was nothing about how to use nutrition as medicine and heal our patients. So I took my time to study that on my own, which is why I got certified, board certified in integrative holistic medicine. And that's been a big passion of mine, that I feel this is how we're really going to change healthcare and patient care, and this is true healthcare, because right now in this country we actually have sick care and not healthcare. So to get started, these are the objectives, because this is for CME and we have to have objectives. So while you guys are looking at the objectives, I'm going to ask you a question. What are some of the leading causes of death here in America? Cardiovascular disease, cancer, COPD, accidents, suicide. Well, I think we'll be talking about that a little later today. Caused by doctors. So these are all, the census agrees, these are all the leading causes of death. Heart disease, cancer, stroke. The ones in red are actually considered lifestyle related. So I'm going to say to you that these are not the leading causes of death in the US. Lifestyle choices are our leading causes of death in the US. And so what are some of the things about lifestyle that you think or that you know are some of the contributors? Yes?
Being in the car all the time.
Lack of activity, lack of exercise. What else? Junk food, which I will say is probably just junk, because you can have food and you can have junk, but you can't have both. Overeating, poor nutrition. So, smoking, exactly. So what we looked at, has anybody heard of blue zones? So there's these 6 areas in the world, they're called blue zones, and in these areas, people normally live to be in their hundreds and healthy. And so they look to see what they have common in these 6 populations. And what they found is that they are eating really healthy, mostly plants. They exercise, they walk everywhere. They do not smoke. They have low stress, they manage their stress levels, they're social, they get restful sleep, and I don't. And they are a part of something bigger than themselves. So these are the 6 pillars of a healthy lifestyle. So I'm going to start with one aspect of this healthy lifestyle, because we've had a lot of talk yesterday about managing stress, sleep, we'll have some talks today as well, so I'm going to focus on nutrition, and specifically one aspect of why nutrition is so important, and it's called the microbiome, the bacteria that we have living in our gut. So in 2013, there was this landmark study that was done, and it was published in Nature Medicine. What they did was they fed, okay, I think I'm missing a slide, but they fed a group of people that are normal, they heavy carnivores, they fed them steak, and then they fed a group of people that were vegans, which I have to tell you, as a vegan, it was probably a whole food plant-based person because you couldn't pay me enough to eat a piece of steak. But what happened to my slides? So what they did is they fed these group of people some steak, and they tested their blood levels for a known cardiovascular marker called TMAO. And what they found is when the group of people that normally eat lots of meat, they eat, that typical American diet, they found that their TMAO levels went up immediately, but when the same food was fed to vegans, it did not go up. So they were thinking, what is the difference? They were then given antibiotics, that meat eaters were given antibiotics, which killed all of the bacteria, good and bad. And they were given steak again, and TMA didn't show up. And they thought, well, maybe it's the bacteria that creates this toxin, TMAO, that leads to one of the factors that leads to cardiovascular disease. So they did a similar study later that year in the New England Journal of Medicine. And this time they used eggs. And these were a group of normal people. They eat normal American diets, not, vegan or anything like that. And they measured their TMAO levels in their bloodstream, and it was elevated. They were then given antibiotics, and they found that there was no TMAO. More recently, this one came out in 2018, they did a similar study, and they found that, again, TMAO levels rise when they eat dietary red meat, and it decreases within 4 weeks of stopping it. So changing the diet, they've showed, has made a big difference. They didn't see this in white meat and non-meat proteins. They did see it, however, in synthetic protein supplements such as N-carnitine. So it's important to note that as well. So what is this average diet that we're talking about? We call it the SAD diet, the Standard American Diet. The Standard American Diet is filled with junk food, oils, fats. You can see that there's 32% is just meat, fish, eggs, dairy. 57% is oils, processed sugars, fast foods. And only 11% is vegetables, fruits, whole grains, lentils, beans, nuts and seeds, plants. And do you know how many servings of plants we should eat in a day? 5, 3, anybody else have any ideas? 3 to 4. It's actually 7 to 13 servings of vegetables and fruits every single day. And when they did a census, do you know what the average serving that an American gets every single day? 1.5 servings if you include French fries and ketchup. Otherwise, it's less than 1. So this is a huge problem, that we're just not getting enough fresh vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, lentils, beans, things like that. We're eating a lot more of the processed food. And I have to tell you, in the last 50 years, this is a whole different trend. And I can tell you, even when I first put this talk together in 2013, the numbers were 12% for plants and 56% for, so it's gotten worse in the last 6 years. Well, there's, the whole psychology behind our stressful lifestyle, trying to get food in quickly. That's kind of beyond the scope of this talk, but we can talk about it after. So this talk is about the microbiome. We have this amazing ecosystem living inside of us. We have about 50 trillion cells and about 100 times more bacteria. So there's more of the bacteria than there is of us. And there's about 1,000 different strains. Makes about 2 to 5% of our 2 to 5 pounds of our body weight. And it's mostly found in our small intestine and colon. So when we eat, we're not just feeding ourselves, we're feeding all of this amazing microbiome, microsystem in our body. So when we're eating prasadam, we're actually benefiting all of these billions and trillions of living entities. And then we depend on this bacteria for our very survival. So what happens on the SAD diet? So on the SAD diet, this is not food that the bacteria recognizes. When it's highly processed, mostly meat, it becomes very acidic, and the bacteria is used to having very alkaline. Our cells need very alkaline. Now the gut itself is very acidic, and it needs to be acidic to digest, but once it hits the intestine, it needs to be alkaline. So if the pH is wrong, it destroys the good bacteria. That gives a chance for a bad bacteria to grow, and it alters our microbiome. This can cause things like leaky gut, celiac disease, and other problems. The wrong bacteria also increases our TMAO, and that leads to CRP, the C-reactive protein, and the high sensitivity CRP, which leads to heart disease. It can lead to cancer, it can lead to autoimmune, and it all has to do with the TMAO, how it's produced, and the byproducts, and I can go into big detail, but I have to leave time for questions, so I'm going to skip that. And then it plays a huge role in our immune system. So our immune system sends out these signals that the microbiome, it's like a chanting response, right? So the immune system sends out signals, and then the bacteria responds, and they say, yes, all is well. But when the bacteria, is overwhelmed with these foods that they don't notice, or they don't know what it is, then they send back a signal that either says this is the wrong thing, or the flora is altered, and they're not sending back a signal that the immune system recognizes. So the immune system says stranger danger, and it launches out a huge reaction, immune reaction. So when I was having allergies, that's an autoimmune reaction. This is one of the reasons why, because my immune system was talking to my gut, and they weren't, synchronous. They weren't having the right response there. But there are other autoimmune disorders, allergies, asthma, we can have food allergies, and all of this is all dependent on what our diet is. So, the foods that we eat also have the potential to turn on and turn off genes. Yesterday we had a little bit of a discussion on genetics, and I would say to you that DNA is not our destiny, dinner is our destiny. So if we look at what this is a whole science called epigenetics, and it talks about the expression of genes. So when we're born with certain genetics, we have genetic predispositions to, let's say, to diabetes or depression, anxiety, things like that. But if we don't do the activities that will turn on those genes, we will never express them. And if we do activities to turn on those genes will be expressed. That's a whole science of epigenetics. So one of the things that we've seen there is that it's not just our genes, but it's also the bacteria. The bacteria are sitting there busy flipping on and off switches. And so depending on how we're eating, that's what's going to be more important than what we're born with. So I guess that kind of resolves that nurture versus nature argument there. So TMAO is a simple molecule that's made by bacteria. It gets inside the cells and it starts switching on those expressive genes that we're talking about. And then if we're not expressing TMAO, it's not going to be in there to turn on genes or turn off genes. So when we have our microbiome has been destroyed, it can lead to obesity, which we know has different risks for cardiovascular disease and other problems like that. It can promote diabetes, it can promote metabolic syndrome, it can promote cancer, it can promote all sorts of things when we alter that microbiome in our body. So why can't we just take an antibiotic to kill the bacteria and not create any TMAO? And it's because we need our bacteria to, part of our immune system. If taking antibiotics were the issue, then we wouldn't have a big antibiotic, resistance epidemic going on right now. And one of the big problems is that our food is actually laced with antibiotics. So the conditions in which cows are held and raised, in such close quarters, they're really at high risk of getting infection, so they're all naturally fed antibiotics. And this doesn't matter if it's a beef cow or a dairy cow. And so a lot of our food supply then is laced with antibiotics, so we're getting antibiotics without even realizing, and that's killing our good bacteria, which makes a huge difference in how our health can play out. So what is the solution? Plant-based diets literally help bacteria culture medium remain as powerful as possible so that thousands of strains of bacteria can proliferate in an environment that is synergistic. It's one of my favorite quotes by Michael Pollan: eat foods, mostly plants, but not too much. And I think that's a great guideline of how we should eat. So we really want to promote plant-strong nutrition.
For real? Michael Pollan?
Yeah.
Pollan? Really? Okay.
When we eat a plant-strong diet, it gives the right foods to the bacteria that are in our gut. It allows them to flourish, and it helps with, so it helps us be healthier. What about probiotics? Why can't we just take probiotics? Well, the problem with probiotics are that, one, if you're taking antibiotics, I definitely recommend taking probiotics. Two, it only has 1 or 2 strains. Remember, we have 1,000 different strains on all of our cells. And so just taking a probiotic isn't enough. I think more important than probiotics are prebiotics. Has anybody heard that term before? Prebiotics are the food that we feed bacteria. And so we just talked about what are important foods to feed bacteria, and that's going to be fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lentils, beans, nuts, and seeds. And so that's going to be all what antibiotics need. What our bacteria need to flourish. So really, it comes down to, I'm not saying that we all have to be 100% vegan, but our bacteria that lives in our gut is 100% vegan. And so in order for it to flourish, we have to eat the foods that it needs and minimize the foods that are going to harm it. So I end with this quote: cardiovascular disease is not something that naturally happens to us and we try to prevent it with diet. Cardiovascular disease only happens with a diet that causes cardiovascular disease. And we can replace cardiovascular disease with cancer, with diabetes, with allergies, with autoimmune disorders. Obviously not accidents, that somebody said was one of the leading causes of death. But so that's what I have. So what questions do you guys have?
What is the definition of vegan diet?
Well, I would probably trade it out. Vegan's just a buzzword, but trade it out with whole food, plant-based. So eating all plants, nothing from an animal source.
Does it mean no dairy also? How about oil?
So oil falls into that 57% that we're talking about, the processed food.
Is it part of plant-based diet, oil?
And no, because we're talking about whole food, plant-based diet. So whole foods, oils are not whole foods.
No oil, no dairy. And food.
That's right. And brown rice, not white rice.
Can we follow that in ISKCON?
That's my mission.
What is obstruction?
People's taste buds.
Habits.
Habits. Yes.
I just wanted to thank that. Amazing talk.
Thank you.
You know, the more and more every year passes by, it comes out, and we're all actually going back to the original source of all the information. In the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna clearly says, Patram Pushpam Phalam Doyam.
Right.
And so when we're talking about whole food, plant-based diet, when we're talking about all these advances in medicine, I think we as medical scientists, medical community, I think if we really go back to the roots where it all begins, I think all the answers are there. And then we can literally just expand on that instead of waiting for new things to come out and then kind of going backwards. Because as you said, eat fruits and eat plants and eat leaves, etc. And that's exactly what the verse says, Patram Pushpam Phalam Doyam.
And even in the 6th chapter, there's the verse that says, you know, we want to eat not too much and not too little, and sleep not too much and not too little, but we want the right amount, right?
Are there microbes in the honey?
Are there microbes in honey? I'm sure everything has.
Probably was looks like honey was appreciated in Ayurveda.
Yes.
Vitamin B12.
Regarding B12.
Yeah, that's the source is vegetarian food doesn't give B12. How do they supplement that?
Nutritional yeast has a lot of B12 in it. It's this big flaky thing. I carry it with me, and I sprinkle it on everything. It's kind of got a cheesy flavor. Yes, so good.
Yeah, quick question on the vegan diet. Of course, I respect vegans and all that, but as part of our scriptures, it says milk and milk products are good. I know the quality of dairy right now is not at the standard what it used to be. So is that the concern, or?
Oh yeah, that's definitely a concern. The other thing is it's not supposed to be like a major part of every meal. You're not supposed to have like milk and cereal and paneer and ice cream and sour cream and cheese, right? It's like 1 cup per person per day.
The next question is on the probiotics and prebiotics. Now, there are supplements which helps us to clean the gut. So you have any thoughts on that? Or?
Well, probiotics have their place, especially if you are needing to clean out your gut, and if you've just taken antibiotics or you're dealing with transitioning to a healthier diet. But if you don't follow probiotics with prebiotics, meaning the food that you're supposed to eat, the nutrition, then the probiotics are just going to come. They're like tourists. They come, they spend their money, and then they leave. They don't set up roots. They don't set up shop. Yes? I'm sorry. She's got a question first now.
Nice talk. What are your thoughts on this new trend, raw vegan diet?
I mean, if you can tolerate a raw vegan diet.
It's not that I want to follow it. Just want to know that are there any studies? Have you compared anything that?
There's not any studies that looks. It's hard to do nutrition studies on a large scale because it's hard to know compliance. But you know, if you follow a raw vegan diet and you're thriving on it, that's great. The only thing I would make sure you are getting are things like whole grains and lentils and beans, because they have a lot of micronutrients. We focus a lot on macronutrients like proteins, carbs, and fats, but we don't focus on the micronutrients like the phytonutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, things like that that are found in foods.
The reason I ask is because the premise they have for raw diet is that when you cook anything, you actually kill. I mean, there's no nutrition left in the food, and
Well, you shouldn't overcook vegetables, right? Like your spinach should still be bright green. It shouldn't be this dark, mushy green thing after you get done cooking it. Same with broccoli, you know, and anything that you cook should be still kind of, you know, crispy. It shouldn't be like mush.
So for the record, no to the vegan diet, or no to the raw diet. This is my question.
I mean, I can tell you that I follow like a 90% raw diet, and the only thing that I eat cooked are grains and beans. Like I don't really eat my vegetables cooked, but of course that's because I don't really cook, and you know, so I eat a lot of smoothies and salads. So one of the things that because this talk was usually about an hour, and I had to condense it down to 30 minutes, well 20 minutes to allow time for questions, but one of the things that I get into in my usual talk is programs, and I put together programs, you know, 10-day programs, immersion programs, 30-day programs, One Simple Change programs, where, you know, I walk my clients through what it's like to eat more whole food plant-based, and they start feeling better, and so they start making changes, you know. So for me, my big goal is one step at a time. I don't expect anybody to become vegan overnight, especially if they're heavy meat eaters. But, you know, add one vegetable in. I had patients that wouldn't even eat steak if it was served on a piece of kale as a you know, embellishment, and we kind of worked with him, and now he's eating raw salads. You know, so that's a big step.
You said you're 90% raw.
90% raw. But it partly is because I don't cook. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
What are your thoughts about yogurt? Because
Okay, so, hold on. Can I get my slides back up? Okay, yogurt is not helpful because it only has one strain. Again, we need many strains. It's not a human strain that they put in yogurt. So again, our body doesn't recognize it. It's not the type of bacteria that it's used to having, so it just goes right through. Plus then you're getting the dairy, you're getting inflammation from that.
Hare Krishna, kindly accept my questions. All goes to Gurudev Prabhupada. We are all Krishna devotees, or trying to become Krishna devotees, and Krishna likes milk and milk products, and we offer milk and milk products to Krishna, and we take Krishna Prasadam. Also, milk is called complete food, whole food. It has got all the nutrients that the humans need. When mother, after she stops breastfeeding the baby, we give cow's milk. Milk is a whole food. It's got all the nutrients.
This is a little bit outside of my
fat,
scope,
protein,
and I think we're out of time. But the short answer to that is what I had responded earlier. We're not supposed to eat paneer with every meal. We're not supposed to have ice cream, sour cream, cheese, right? We're just supposed to have 1 cup of milk every day. And again, it says to not eat too much and not to eat too little. We have to eat the right amount. And so if we're doing dairy and everything, it's more than what was even, I think even Prabhupada said that, so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Chachmawala. I have noticed that there are still several unanswered questions, and Dr. Chachmawala is here. You can approach her during the break.